Welcome to Seven Blaze Podcast, episode number 25. And again, today's show will be in English. I am your host, Jan Kruusma. And today we have, for the guest, we have Shardee Rebas from AIS.
Visit
Estonia, who is the e-marketing coordinator for Visiting Estonia, and Silver Tambur, who is editor-in-chief and co-founder of EstonianWorld, that is currently the most popular English language publication about Estonia.
Hello.
In this episode, we are going to talk about how to make a country seem desirable and awesome. In short, how to market the country. If you like this podcast episode, then don't forget to comment and share it on social media. And if you have any suggestions for me, then please write me a letter on Facebook or on email. So this it's always awkward to start the show, but once the show gets started, it gets better and better. So let's get to the guests. Silver, why do you do what you do?
Well, I was about to say ladies first, but yeah, let's start then. Well, I was actually living in London for a long time. I left Estonia in 2000, so it was 4 years before Estonia joined the European Union. And I didn't actually, when I left Estonia, I didn't have that. I didn't have very warm feelings about Estonia because I was a little bit fed up and you know, I wanted to obviously discover the world, etc. But I stayed in London for a long time, over 10 years, and there's a saying among the Estonian communities abroad. They say that if you've been away from Estonia for about 10 years, you start to miss the country. And in my case, that is true. When, you know, I think first 5 years after I'd left Estonia, I sort of I didn't even want to come back. I remember I was, you know, I saw some dreams about being imprisoned in Estonia and can't get out anymore. And so I really, you know, I was integrating very much into British society. But then, you know, I started visiting again, and obviously my family and friends were still here, and things changed completely. I started to well, first of all, obviously personally, I started to miss the country a bit. The second, you know, the wider context around Europe and the world changed. Estonia joined the European Union in 2004. Then, you know, EasyJet, British airline, started flying to Tallinn. More and more people started to come here. Then, obviously, we had Skype, we had, you know, the startup ecosystem, and all that started to make an impact around British and American media. And I noticed that, and at the same time I wanted to get back into media. And back in Estonia I had studied journalism, but when I went to London, you know, I did all sorts of jobs. And then around 2011, I think, about 6 years ago, I started writing to local Estonian media, Delfi and Eesti Päevaleht. I started interviewing Estonians who were living in London, Chris Soonik and Ivo Aulik, who set up a minicab company there, etc. And then suddenly, after about half a year or so doing that, I just sort of suddenly had an idea that you know, let's start something our own, and that's how EstonianWorld was born. At first, we thought we'll do it in like two languages, Estonian and English, but then we realized that, you know, we will not have resources for that, and that's when we decided we'll do it in English. And in 2012, summer, in July 2012, that's when we first started publishing articles on EstonianWorld. So that's how EstonianWorld was born. But the background around it was also that we noticed, that many famous outlets are writing about Estonia, The Economist and Wall Street Journal, etc. But Estonians are not really doing themselves. So we thought, we are Estonians. Why don't we write about us? And we have more inside knowledge than it's just random journalists from London or New York or Washington coming here. So that was the wider idea behind EstonianWorld. And of course, when you live in London or any other big city, as most Estonians know, many local people or people from elsewhere around the world don't really know Estonian that well. So we thought that if we start something like EstonianWorld, where we write about our country, our success stories, Estonians can share those stories with their friends, their colleagues, etc. And that's exactly what happened with EstonianWorld. So right at the beginning, after like 2 months after starting it, it kind of started to work. Estonians started to really share it, and that's how we started it. Sorry, that was a bit long, guys.
Very, very thorough. Shardee?
I don't remember the question anymore.
In short, why do you do what you do? What's your story?
I guess this part is similar, that you have to have been away from Estonia for a certain time to really love it. I wasn't away for too long, so it took me less than 10 years. I was also in London for a year, and I worked in tourism. When I got back to Estonia, which was actually my decision after a year in London, that I don't see myself living there. Then when I saw this job at Visit Estonia, I had worked with Visit Norway before. That's like a destination marketing organization in every country, but I never thought that there is one in Estonia because I never heard about it, or whenever I was in Estonia, I didn't know anything about them. And after working with Visit Norway, it seemed like a really cool thing to do to market my country, because marketing some random product can be tricky if you don't really believe in it. But I knew that I love Estonia, so this seemed like a perfect job for me to go for. So that's how I ended up in Visit Estonia. That was, I guess, a year after EstonianWorld came, 2013.
Usually in the show, I mostly concentrate on the guests, but I also want to share my story because I really feel you, both of you. I wasn't living away for so long from Estonia, but I was living in Finland in 6th and 7th grade. So 2 years, and then I went to work went to work in summers in Finland before I came to Estonia to study IT. Then I also realized that very early on that we have a very beautiful and really nice country, very nice people. So it's good to go away. Estonia needs to. Each Estonian should live at least 1 year somewhere abroad, and this will makes it actually appreciate the country much more. Okay,
I absolutely agree with you. Yes, that's a good point. And I think the longer you spend away, the more you kind of start to see the positive side. So.
I once visited Vienna, and we got an invite to the how do you call it? Ambassador threw a party for Estonians living who live or were in Vienna.
Okay.
And we had a really big party, and I have never seen so friendly Estonians before in my life.
Absolutely, same as in London. There's an organization called the Estonian Guild in London, and I remember during the Olympics, London Olympics in 2012. there were like 400 of us, I think, got together, you know, and the Prime Minister at the time, Estonian Prime Minister was Andrus Ansip was there, and everyone was like really, really, really cozy and friendly, you know. It's just, you know, and also the Prime Minister was different than he's here in Estonia. So the vibe is somehow different, yeah. I mean, then you really sort of appreciate meeting other Estonians, etc. So that's an interesting aspect, yeah.
So let's get to social media. Shardee, what kind of social media platforms do you use for your personal marketing or personal life?
Instagram, well, Facebook less and less. I don't really post anything. I used to use Snapchat more. Now I use it less than WhatsApp, Viber, LinkedIn sometimes. Did I miss something? Twitter, I normally use only during like conferences or events. I don't really use it daily. But I quite like it, actually. So maybe I started using it more.
Well, I'm really still a Facebook fan, I guess. I was quite late at started using Instagram. So I use Facebook and Twitter, but if I'm using, I mean, if talking about the Estonian world, then of course Facebook is the most important for us, because it's still, Estonian world is really content based. I guess that's a little bit different from Visit Estonia, and that is, you know, a large part of your work is about the pictures and stuff. Estonian world is really very much content based, you know. Although we also put a lot of emphasis on photos, it's more and more about stories. And so we really took off on Facebook. We now have almost 30,000 followers on Facebook, and that's talking about Estonian English language media. Then that's way more than any other outlet. Just for comparison, ERR News has got like 3,500 or something like that. And also I use Twitter for Estonian World as well. We have an account on Instagram, but I have to say Estonian World hasn't been very successful on Instagram. We were quite late to start using it, and yes, it's difficult when you're really producing articles to stand out on Instagram.
I very often see this with my guests that everyone has one favorite platform, and always everybody tells why their platform is the best. In a way, but in a sense, I would see that EstonianWorld would have a huge, maybe potential in Instagram. At least, let's say, behind the scenes, making of, being on a podcast, and so on.
Quite possible. Maybe we just need to do things differently. I need to find a different person to do that. Maybe because I'm more focused on Facebook and Twitter myself, then that's the reason we haven't been that successful there yet. But yeah, but I generally agree that the Facebook is actually in decline in some ways. Although we don't really notice it, we still get for Estonian World, Facebook is like a crucial tool. You know, we're getting like over 50% of our traffic from Facebook, so it's for us, it's like a crucial really. But generally speaking, I have noticed that some people are getting a bit fed up because it's just overflow of information on Facebook, and just too much sometimes. And personally, for me as well, it gets too much sometimes because I noticed it's just so much irrelevant information now going on there. So yeah,
I think work-wise, Facebook is definitely biggest for us as well. And last summer we started producing content that we didn't really do on that level before, so now it's a lot bigger. And the other thing, videos, I see YouTube doesn't really work for us, but on Facebook videos work really well for us.
Probably depends a lot on the target group who you are after.
And we have Facebook in 8 languages, so that's also different. So you any other channel is only in English, but Facebook we have Norwegian, Japanese, you name it.
Wow. So in my shows usually I always have a guest talking about their field of expertise or their product or their company or how they are doing in social media, and then but first time that we're talking about the country. So, what does it take to market a country?
I would say it's a really big thing, of course. So that's why at first I said I'm from Visit Estonia, because it can be really confusing if you say EAS, then people think, oh, she's the one behind this.
Was EAS in
Enterprise
Estonia.
Enterprise Estonia.
It's in English, yeah. So I think this is really confusing for most people, what is really done in Enterprise Estonia, because mainly we're known for sharing European Union money. But actually we have really many departments that promote Estonia on a daily basis. There are people who work on promoting Estonia and have done that for years. So Visit Estonia is just one department, which is tourism in there. And I wouldn't say I know how to promote Estonia in a big context, because I only do like the destination marketing part. So we have people who do Estonia, we have people who do invest in Estonia, work in Estonia, study in Estonia, Estonian, I don't know, space agencies. So this is all like bits and pieces, and we're just a small part of it. So I think I have the easiest part, because everyone allowed to travel, and even if you wouldn't want to live or study here, then coming here and seeing the medieval city or nature is still beautiful.
Well, EstonianWorld, I guess it's a little bit different case in that sense that it's not state-owned agency. It's actually private initiative, and well, it's a media outlet. So, and we have actually changed a little bit. If we look back when we started, some people even asked us, you know, is it like a Visit Estonia #2 or something? Because we used lots of photo material, lots of photos from the Enterprise Estonia's photo bank and stuff. And really, at the beginning, we had lots of, you know, very, very positive stories and you know, highlighting the architecture and in the same famous old medieval old town. But EstonianWorld has actually evolved a bit, well, quite a lot, in fact, over 5 years. So if we look at it now, then we also highlight the critical aspects. We have lots of stories by expats who, you know, come to settle in Estonia and live in Estonia, and they share their experiences. So it's not just anymore about you know, pretty pictures. It's a really the way we well, if you call it market Estonia, is that really we tell the story. We open different aspects, and that's not just about. Anymore about like you know, the tourist sites. It's about actually living here, you know, the real life. Well, for example, a few weeks ago, a French lady who came to live in Estonia, she wrote a story about how to buy a house in Estonia in 3 days. And that was a positive story, because she said in France it would take like, you know, I can't remember, it was like 6 weeks or something. So, you know, the difference was huge. So we have very sort of practical stories where really, you know, people share they and compare their countries to Estonia, for example. So, you know, that's how we do it. So I wouldn't call it the EstonianWorld really a marketing platform, but of course emphasis is more on positive stories, because of, as I said before, that's how we started. You know, that's in our DNA.
You have very good content, I have to say.
Thank you.
Have you ever done cross referencing each other?
We post your stories every now and then, but I think you worked with some other department more.
I think at the beginning we used a lot. Yeah, I think at the beginning Visit Estonia really shared a lot of stories, but now indeed we work with lots of different platforms, and some of them indeed also under Enterprise Estonia, like Estonia, but also e-governance academy and of course Startup Estonia, you know, Garage Startup Community, Garage 48, etc. So we pretty much work with all the organizations that somehow you know, promote or sell Estonia, since in some ways we always have something in common or some connection. So yeah.
If I would like to add a national key to my marketing activities. So what would my first approach, what should it be? To, let's say, I want to add an Estonian flag to my logo, not logo, but let's say to my brand story. What should the first thing I should be aware of?
I'm not sure about using flag. I think there are certain rules for that. But if you want to use brand Estonia, like font colors and so on, then you can just go ahead and do it. It's all free.
Mostly, I mean, like if I want to like integrate it, let's say I go to another country to promote my services, and I want to put an emphasis that I am from Estonia, Estonian companies. So, what would number one?
So you mean like what? How you what's the sort of elevator pitch you mean?
Yes.
About Estonia? If someone asks, well, I guess it's something that we still in Estonia are trying to find an answer for. I mean, that's, you know, the whole discussion about brand Estonia, recent one, and it's also, you know, the question was how we doing it. But well, good question. I remember when I first went to live in London, and of course no one knew anything about Estonia, and then really I think many Estonians said that, oh, we are by the Finland, you know, we're next to Finland, that's where Estonia is. And of course you had to explain that in Estonia we have our own language and stuff. But of course I think it's evolved over the years, and now when you're talking about, depends on what community you're talking to, right? It's also, you know, Estonia never will be another, you know, well, maybe it will, but I don't think it will be as famous or as well known as you know, Norway or the UK, or, you know, some really, you know, long established countries. We might get there, but not maybe in, you know, next 5-10 years. So I think you're talking about different groups. When talking about with the tech community, you know, in America or Britain, you tend to know about Estonian startup community, and that we are good at startups. We have more startups per capita in Europe than any other country, etc. But of course, if you're talking about some other groups, they might know indeed the old town in Tallinn, and, you know, they might know Estonia for that. Some people know Estonia for music, you know. There's, for example, a gay community in London, huge gay community, who know Estonia for Eurovision, you know. That's, you know, it may sound funny, but they remember, you know, our Eurovision song. So I think it's difficult to really to say that it's like uniform, that, you know, uniformed answer for that.
I would say this is the thing that has been maybe miscommunicated. Like when we were looking for a new brand Estonia, then everyone were talking about logo, but the real idea was creating a toolbox. That exactly like your question, like if I have this company, what should I talk about? And this is what they are creating. Like if you're, I don't know, in food scene, then you can talk about Estonian chef being at the Olympics, or Chef's Olympics finals, or Estonian chef working in world's best restaurant, or knowing what are the stories in your field. And this is the idea of the toolbox, that you get the basic stories that kind of match your company, and then you can build up on these stories.
Well, we don't really use the logos and that, but branding in that sort of, you know, physical sense as logos and stuff. But as I said, with EstonianWorld, we do put a lot of emphasis on images, you know, that visuals. So that's really what we do. But of course, again, you know, if you're a media outlet, you cannot use the same you know, skyline picture of Tallinn every time. So, you know, we ourselves as editors, we get bored of that. So, you know, we did that at the beginning, but increasingly we tried to use different images, and not just from Tallinn, but also, you know, Tartu and other towns, and the nature and countryside. One critic for about Enterprise Estonia, I would say, is that I think it's improving now, and that's really good with the Visit Estonia, but is that lack of good images or like good photos about Estonia. I mean, the photo bank they had, some of the photos are like 10 and more years old. Visit Estonia's got a really great Flickr account, and that's really,
and everyone is allowed to use it, right?
Well, Shardee again answer that question.
I think they have a public photo bank available for everyone.
The photos we have bought in last 2 years, mainly you can use them. The photos that are older have different contracts, so it depends. But the ones on Flickr are mainly for free use. You just have to follow
Google
the
Flickr
terms and conditions.
Okay. I remember when I was traveling in Asia, I always explained it's a really small country, and I was emphasizing that the strength is that we're so small and we are still alive in the 21st century.
Well, yeah, I guess that's a good point. But when you say small, that reminds me the recent discussion about when the new gateway page Estonia.ee and the brand Estonia, when the page was introduced, I think there's a line somewhere there which says that don't emphasize the word small.
Okay.
So that's that, and that was a good. I mean, I think that's got a good point. That we sort of ourselves we sort of playing us down sometimes. And we're saying tiny, small, and perhaps maybe there's a point that we shouldn't emphasize that too much.
I will keep that in mind next time I travel. Thank you. So Shardee, what do you think is the main differences between marketing? You are marketing tourism of Estonia, but marketing a country versus marketing a company. Can you think of it as the same thing, or?
It's definitely not the same thing. If you have a product that you're responsible for, then you can always take a feedback and fix it. That's the one thing.
Yeah.
But we don't really have a product, like if someone doesn't like a spa or some city or roads or so on, then we're not in charge of everything that happens in Estonia. And the other thing is maybe the same logo thing, that a lot of what we do in tourism department, okay, if we have events or something where we are kind of out with Visit Estonia, then we use the logo. But a lot of our work is working with influencers, bringing bloggers here, having like content out there about Estonia that doesn't say anything about Visit Estonia. So that people shouldn't even know that we're kind of behind it.
Do you use those articles in Facebook then? Or can
we use them on Facebook as well, or wherever in social media, but the main idea is like if we want to talk about food, then we invite food journalists. If we want to talk about sailing in Sweden, or kind of it takes a long time to change perception. So if we have themes like sailing or golf or kind of really niche topics, then you have to get the biggest influencers, media and so on. But it doesn't matter that it's Visit Estonia. It's more like Estonia. So for a company or brand, it's always important to have, your name on it. But I think for us, it's important to remember that it's not about us. It's about the general image of the country. I think that's a big difference.
Well, I think Shardee explained it more or less already, so I don't have much to add. But of course, there's well, it's yes. I mean, for Estonia as a media outlet, of course, our subject is also Estonia. So
because you are using Estonia
exactly. So in that sense, the product is Estonia. That's how it is. In that sense, it is different from the classical sort of media outlet that they have different subjects. So our subject very much is indeed the Estonia or people relating to Estonia. So yes, but as Shardee said, it's very different with the companies. You really selling your whatever your service or product you produce. So it's a little bit different, yeah.
How you mentioned it's quite Silver. You mentioned it's quite a big part. Is your Facebook channel? But in case of Visit Estonia, how big of a proportion is marketing in social media or in digital marketing in general?
It's growing every year. I think it's still not big enough. all the online part, like everything in public sector takes a long time. We could do so much more on social, but I think even the fact that we don't have a person who works full time on social media shows that, it could be done a lot more. I can't really say like there's a certain amount of budget or for campaigns, like there can be, like Epic Estonia was mainly about social impact. There was a campaign in Sweden the year before last year that won the marketing award as well.
Can our listeners find the summary of the?
You can on YouTube. You can look for Epic Estonia case study, and then you get the case study.
Okay.
But we also have campaigns where social has like smaller parts. Like if your target group are Germans that are 40 plus, or I don't know, spa in Finland, same maybe 40 to 60, then social has less impact. So it really depends, because we have so many different activities going on at the same time. We can have a family campaign in Latvia, Russia, and Finland. At the same time, there is sailing campaign in Sweden and Germany. They're like small campaigns that locals don't really know anything about because they're not the target group. So
why not promote this content more to Estonians themselves also, to get a better, not to feel small anymore, but to feel better about their country's tourists, and also would know what to then market or say to when they're traveling.
I can just say until last year we had different structure in Visit Estonia, where we had market managers for all our main markets, and that just changed. So now we start to do more international campaigns. So I think it's changing. So when we do international campaigns, hopefully it's also known widely, because so far it was more like campaign in Germany, campaign in UK, campaign in Sweden. But now that we do international campaigns, I hope they'll be big enough so the locals also know.
I just want to be a little bit critical here as well about the public sector, and that's Shardee, because Shardee actually brought it up herself. Is that my experience with the public sector is I'm not overly critical. I'm just saying that some what I've noticed, and I think it's a problem in a small country like Estonia, is that there are too many different departments, too many different people dealing with more or less the same thing. I think we're not using our resources wisely enough here. If you take into account, it is we have, I think, just over 600,000 taxpayers here. So it's nothing. In London, it's like a couple of boroughs. It's just. I think we need to use more wisely the resources we have, and I've noticed that with Visit Estonia and other departments in the government as well, that just too many people doing different things, but they should collaborate more to create more synergy. This is really a problem, I think, in Estonia, and it's not just to do with the marketing and tourism; it's in other that's in the business generally, and when we deal with public sector. So that's really where I see a lot of improvement, that we should be focusing more. And of course, private public sector collaborate together, but also identify the things we really need to sell, how we need to sell, and collaborate more.
I think here the keyword is cooperation. And
absolutely.
I also have a dream that either I make it myself or Estonia will make one itself, Estonian social media ministry or Estonian marketing ministry would be.
Go for it.
Does any country have a marketing ministry?
specifically? I think
or tourism.
Some of the Arab countries probably have. I wouldn't be surprised if United Arab Emirates or Dubai, or which is part of the United Arab Emirates, that they would have a minister for that.
Mm-hmm. But what other countries you have seen that are doing a good job in marketing their country?
I like Norway, of course, because I've seen them maybe closely enough. Iceland has been a good example for most of the destination marketing.
Iceland got very lucky with football. So now they're... my cousin is living there, is complaining that there's no space to live and rental prices are super high.
I think one thing that's good there is the same thing, that cooperation. They have 3 times less people than we have. But as much as I've met the people who work with Inspired by Iceland, and they have probably also less media and advertising agencies, but the ones that kind of win procurements, or I don't know, seem to be already really experienced, because UK is their home market and US is right there. Mm-hmm. And they seem to be really good. So they're kind of lucky also, I think, with having really good companies that are the biggest.
Yeah, I agree. Norway and Iceland both really stand out. But I would also mention New Zealand, for example. But of course, it's in that sense again. I cannot say that we, that if we compare Estonia to those countries, then of course it's not really fair, because these are much older countries and they had a stable story, stable history. Our starting point was really only just 26 years ago. But of course, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't look at how they do things or learn from them. And I know in Enterprise Estonia, I think they've had some contacts with New Zealand, for example, as well, of the agencies that I think they're doing a really great job. But also Singapore. But again, why I mentioned Singapore, of course, Singapore, I don't think they have. I'm not quite sure, but I don't think they have like a huge, marketing budget or department. But with the Singapore, you see the story sells. This is actually a good example of how the country is successful, and the country itself. The people coming there, the story about it's a good business climate. It's safe. So this is, you see, where the story comes in. It's not about creating an ad or logo or stuff. Mm-hmm. You actually associate Singapore with something that is successful and great place.
What about Australia? Why does all young Estonians want to go there? What are they doing?
Word of mouth.
Word of mouth.
That's probably true. Yeah.
What about brand books? Is it common that a country has a brand book?
I believe every country has some sort of brand book.
And in here I'm trying to not getting to the topic of the Estonian brand book. What's your take on brand.estonia.ee?
When it was introduced a few months ago, first of all, I want to say I really like the font, the new font. I think it was sort of minimalistic and fresh and...
I know.
Yeah, I know, exactly, called I know. I think that was really great. A general approach, yes and no. Again, I like minimalistic design. I like that sort of neat and tidy approach. But of course, I think there were some things I would do differently. One, photos again. I think it portrayed Estonia as a little bit too gloomy. I appreciate the honesty behind it. As we know, we just had like 6 months long winter here, and it does, get pretty cold and grey sometimes.
And longer.
But at the same time, we also have a beautiful summer when it is beautiful. But Hopefully it is. I compared to Britain, it is much warmer country, but I wouldn't say they have more sunlight, for example. So I would say Estonia's summer is actually more beautiful. So I think taking even the sort of reality into account and approaching it honestly, it was a little bit too gloomy. I think it's changed already. They've changed some of the photos there and images and stuff. But at first, that raised questions. Of course, in Estonia there was a huge controversy about boulders. The infamous boulder image. Now, I've interviewed, the team members behind the new brand concept, and after talking to them, I do understand it better where they came from. Of course, the boulder, I think. It was an interesting fact that Estonia has got more glacial boulders than any other country in Europe, I think, and of course they wanted to just. Bring up something unique. Apparently Finnish, they've got, they highlight Northern Lights, for example, Finland's campaign. So, we also have Northern Lights, but of course, if another country has already done it, you don't want to repeat it, right? So in that sense, I do understand why they wanted to find something unique. But at the same time, of course, it's a tricky one because there are only a certain amount of people in the world who would be interested to come to Estonia to see a boulder. It's not your Norwegian, fjords or some Alps or it's not really that, you would get massive amount of people coming to see that huge stone somewhere. It is beautiful to see, but but with any campaign, you cannot say immediately how effective or how good it is, and Shardee probably knows it better. So let's give it a little time. Let's see how it works. I spoke to one of my friends in New Zealand about it, and he liked it. He said, "Oh, it's great," and he liked the slogan there on the news site, which said that Estonia is a place for independent minds. That's actually quite good. Again, probably some people didn't get it here, but if you start thinking about the individual spirit of Estonians, and then I think it actually does make sense. So they were good and bad. I think it just lacked some in some ways, but I think it had perhaps internally, domestically in Estonia, it had too much negative sort of feedback. I think it wasn't fair.
Thinking what I'm allowed to answer to that.
You don't have to answer it if you don't want.
Well, I guess I can answer.
In the personal view,
just
what do you think?
I can't give my personal view. I think it was again kind of impression that someone came together, or the design team, and they made a new brand, and now go ahead and use this boulder. That's not the case, because we have had brand for a long time, and Welcome to Estonia was just a really, really small part of it. If we talk about stories behind it, they haven't really changed much. Like clean environment, digital society, it's still the same. The main things that we work with, like on daily basis, they really haven't changed. It's just the font, the color, and so on. So I would say this actually has worked better, like on events like just simple session or skiing events or so on. It really stands out visually better. So this is a good thing. When it comes to stories, then the next step for a brand would be living up to those stories. Like if you come here as a tourist, do you really experience digital society or all the clean environment? And independent minds is something that I would say us as Visit Estonia, we don't really have stories, or we don't really have content around this now. So that someone who comes here and doesn't know anything about brand Estonia, I think the question is, what are they saying about Estonia? If you come here, what do you experience and what do you live with? What are those stories? And if these match with the ones that we want to tell, then this is good branding.
I mean, as Shardee said, I think it's a good point that you have to live up to it. So if you sell the country, then be honest. I mean, and in that sense, I really appreciated the honesty behind the new brand concept. Because indeed, I have met some people who, in fact, just last weekend I spoke to an American couple from Silicon Valley. Of course, Silicon Valley is not really the best example because it's a bubble, but they said they're looking for some programmers here in Estonia right now, and they said that the package or marketing is actually greater than the actual substance. So style over substance here. They said they have had some issues, and things are moving as fast as they would like to, and things like that. So if we create something, the story and sort of myth, then really we have to, deliver. Mm-hmm. I think it's important because otherwise people will get disappointed and then they will not come back or leave. So.
How do you measure the impact what you're doing?
Depends on activity. If we have like certain campaigns, like a spa campaign where we actually sell packages for like overnights in spa, it's really simple to measure that. Mm-hmm. If we have more like awareness campaigns or just like Epic Estonia was not so much about Swedes coming here and now loving Estonia, but it was more about slowly starting to get those new images and messages through and continue doing it. So we see that the tourism from Sweden has grown, but we can't say that yes, this is just because of us. This is the hardest part about I think Visit Estonia, that we definitely have impact here and there, but for so many activities, we can't really say yet that this is because of us. In future, when we really plan to use those platforms that tell you, like, if someone has, I don't know, visited your campaign page or your social media, and if they have booked a flight to Estonia in, I don't know, Booking.com or Expedia or wherever in next 6 to 12 months, then you can kind of, maybe there is kind of connection there. This is future. We don't have campaigns where we have done that, but I think it's maybe something where we could say, like, we see that 40% of Latvians have come here after that, Mm-hmm. But we can't say it's because of us, but we see that they've been here.
I just, by the way, that reminds me that I want to say something very positive about Visit Estonia now, is that really I've noticed that on Facebook, compared to some other countries, and even some countries that are actually much bigger than Estonia, the equivalent of Visit Estonia sites, they have less followers than Estonia's Visit Estonia on Facebook. I can't remember exactly which country, but I just recently noticed. So, it seems that Visit Estonia has done a really good job, actually, of getting lots of followers. But how we, with EstonianWorld, it's, by the way, our markets are a little bit different in a sense that Visit Estonia is, I think you're focusing more on the neighboring countries, Sweden and etc. EstonianWorld is an English language media outlet. Most or majority of our readers are in English speaking countries. So the United States, United Kingdom, Australia, Canada, but also some neighboring countries, like of course Finland and Sweden. But how we do, how we measure, well, it's different with the media outlet, of course. But I know some examples when we wrote about e-residency, Estonia's e-residency, then some people heard about it from, EstonianWorld by reading the articles. There are also some business deals that were done because of that. For example, a startup called Leap-In. They offer services which are linked to the residency, and someone who read about Leap-In from on the EstonianWorld started using these services, and then I think became a resident, etc. So there are stories like that. But of course, again, Shardee said with a media outlet as well, you have readers. You of course you see the likes and you see the feedback and stuff, but you cannot really. How can you say what's the impact? Of course, the impact is they read about Estonia and know more about it. But what's the actual benefit? Depends how we measure it. Yeah.
Could you give some examples of maybe campaigns that you have done to increase your followers or readability that our listeners should be aware of? I personally was taking part in this Visit Estonia Snapchat takeover, where I was asked to film my day for one day, and I think Visit Estonia has done a really good job with Snapchat. I don't know many other companies in Estonia who actually have utilized or used Snapchat to.
I think there are
really
more that are using it now. We just were the first ones, maybe, or one of the first ones to really test it. But that's true, like we don't have many campaigns or activities that locals should know. Puhka Eestis is actually like the Estonian name of Visit Estonia. It's not really a campaign, but for the last 3 years, so it's the third year now, every spring we have, counties takeover, where one county takes our Facebook over for 1 week. So that's to kind of highlight regions, not just to talk about what we want to talk about, but to give them a chance to talk about what's important for them and local things. So I guess they have made so many games and contests there that I see that it has worked better than our kind of average content creation when we don't have this. So I think maybe this is something that locals have seen. I can just say, like, if you want to follow Visit Estonia on Facebook, not the Estonian version of it, then you can actually switch to English version.
It has different content?
It has totally different content. So, like, yeah, under a cover photo, there are 3 dots where you can switch region and then you can choose which market you want to follow. Because we get that question that the Facebook formulas kind of decide where you should belong to. But some people actually want to follow some other page. And there are many that want to follow international page, but they're directed to Russian or Estonian page. So you can change that. Now on Instagram, we have photographers takeover that starts next week.
So what's the Instagram name for the account?
Visit Estonia.
Visit Estonia. At Visit Estonia, yeah.
Yeah, so this is the first time we do something on Instagram where we actually work with locals. Because so far we have mainly used user-generated content that comes from hashtag Visit Estonia, mainly. But we haven't really done any campaigns so far. So this is the first time we want to give also local photographers a chance to highlight their work.
Okay.
It's a little bit different with a media outlet, but talking about campaigns, one of the promoters of Estonian artists, a couple of Estonian artists recently approached us and said, do you want to do run a campaign with us in London? Because those artists are going to perform in London. But we haven't done it yet. But with a media outlet, of course, you always have to look after your readers. And many readers have been with us, for almost 5 years. You cannot run an article on the same subject again, or write exactly about the same thing again. So you always have to somehow invent and come up with new ideas and new subjects and new topics. And that's what we do with EstonianWorld. We try to come up with new ideas and maybe highlight things that haven't been highlighted before. For example, if we're talking about some places in Estonia, we try to show different places and different aspects than just Tallinn or Tartu. But of course, other thing is about people. Recently, we started a new project collaborating with the University of Tartu, where we interview people who are not Estonians, but okay, how should I say, Russian-speaking Estonians, because I think that's really one thing that concerns me is that we have 25% of our population who's natively Russian-speaking, and outside Estonia, most people don't know anything about them, and their voices are not really heard. And this is the thing with the Estonian world. It's not really, we write about Estonia, but it's not like some kind of nationalistic voice that sort of who's proper Estonian. It's about everyone who lives here. So what we want to do is we want to ensure that the Russian speaking population, that their voices are heard as well. So we published a story. A guy born to Russian speaking family in Kohtla-Järve, which is in Ida-Viru County, who doesn't know Estonian world, wrote about his experiences and his life in Estonia, and it wasn't overly positive. He was negative. He was well integrated, learned Estonian and studying here, but he also highlighted some of the negative aspects. That still sometimes he finds it difficult to integrate into society. So this is if you really want to be on again, if you're a media outlet, you have to be honest. You have to highlight the truth. This is just one of the example what we started doing.
It's a very interesting and a hard topic because many of my Russian friends are not complained is the wrong word, but pointed out that they feel like guests at their own home. So.
Yes, and really that's, for me as an editor, it's interesting as well, because I was born into Estonian speaking family, of course, not of course, but yes, and then I don't really know much about Russian speaking population, but I want to know. So for me as an editor, it's also an interesting topic. But I have to say, when we shared that, of course, it had lots of readers and lots of feedback, but also negative feedback. And some of the readers were like surprised because, to be honest, if you're not born in Estonia, you don't really know much about it, and so it comes to you as a surprise. And this that's the reality and the sort of hype or myth kind of contradict here sometimes each other. Mm-hmm. Is that's one of the troubles really, is that most of it's not really a trouble if you're talking about marketing, but it comes back to the topic we discussed before, is that whether you are honest or you make everything up, is that most of the Western media, the way they portray Estonia is actually very positive. So if you're talking about from a marketing point of view, we are in a good place. We have so many good articles about Estonia. We have great friends. One of the most well known is probably Edward Lucas, who's one of the senior editor at The Economist. People like that. They've written so many good articles about Estonia for years and years. But of course, the downside is that. That creates among people who don't know anything really about Estonia and who read only those articles, that we create some kind of a picture that is, it doesn't reflect 100% the reality. And this is where we actually, as a media outlet, EstonianWorld, we are increasingly trying to distinct ourselves, is that we are based now in Thailand. We want to also highlight some of the social aspects, like this one I mentioned, the Russian-speaking population.
Shardee mentioned the campaign that I think had a real great part of freedom and trust in the people who actually take over the channels. So I think it's a really cool thing to do. But how have you dealt with if something negative arises, or how do you deal with negative images about the country?
We don't really have a lot of that. We have some negative comments every now and then on Facebook. Mainly, I think Instagram is so much more friendly. So if there's anything negative, it's mainly on Facebook. On Snapchat, it was more about... I don't remember having like very bad comments there. It was more like you never knew what someone is doing, or if it's maybe somehow against good practices or kind of brand values. But normally it wasn't a problem. And if that happens, I think that was kind of the cool thing about it, that it was authentic, that people realized that it's a takeover by local people and we don't control it. And if there was something like, what the hell is this? Then this is real life. And I think that's the value of Snapchat, to show the backstage, and it's not always pretty and awesome. It's the way it is. And on Facebook, if there is something negative, then if we have a reply, then we reply. If it's someone who just keeps, I don't know, who doesn't
trolling.
really, then what can we do? You know, we can't really change if someone is really strict.
Well, our feedback has been pretty positive as well. But mentioning Russia again, that's always a bit controversial topic. We have a security section where we, write about security issues. We started actually that because Estonia is pretty good at cybersecurity. That's again where we punch above our weight, globally. But of course things changed because of, as we know, what happened in Crimea in 2014, etc. And then we started writing about defense issues, the US forces in Estonia and stuff. But that created some negative backlash, and it still does. Again, as you mentioned, trolls. We do get lots of them when we write about, for example, NATO troops in Estonia or Estonian Defence Force, whatever. We do get lots of trolls who are commenting on Facebook and stuff and saying, "Oh, this is attack against Russia and things like that." So this is, I actually distinct very much two things. We have Estonian Russian-speaking population, and then we have Russia as a country where we have political problems, but I think it's not clear to some of the wider audiences. They kind of mix those things to up. They even say, when we write about defense or security issues, sometimes they say, "Oh, it's against Russia, it's Russophobic and stuff." Whereas we don't as a media outlet, we don't see it in that way. When you criticize the political leadership of another country, that's not against Russians. But then, yes, sometimes the readers and trolls and the sort of clash there. But this is, I think, the security issues. That's actually, when talking about marketing around the world, it's not a good thing that we have lots of news about how we have NATO troops and American troops and stuff, because I know people in Britain and America who kind of asking, what's happening next? Is it like the Third World War starting out? And I don't think it's really that attractive. If you think yourself, for example, Middle East. If there is a conflict there, you're not really sure if you want to take a next flight there and have your holiday. And I think that doesn't do any good for us, that we have too many stories about NATO troops and conflict with Russia. So it's a conflict for us as well as a media outlet, because on one hand, we have to sort of write about it, we feel like, because this is the fact and it's the truth. But if you think about it from the marketing point of view, you just start wondering how many people will not come to Estonia because of that, or how many investors, how many businessmen will decide not to invest because they are just afraid that there will be soon war break out here. In reality, we in Estonia, we don't feel that, right? We don't feel that there's a war, coming to starting. But if you're in America or Britain or some countries where they don't know, they have never been here, I just wonder whether they actually might be afraid to come here. I don't know. Maybe
I can say as I see what's written about Estonia on Twitter on daily basis, then there are certain weeks when, like, people who use Twitter in the UK or US, if you use this more than, I don't know, Google just to see what is talked about a country, then sometimes there are only like photos of tanks and kind of war, and they're actually English and American articles, not like from here. So if I would be like, I don't want to go there. Because it's kind of scary looking just this. This is why we kind of tried to post nice photos as well on Twitter, but they still dominate sometimes.
Yeah, exactly.
Before we get too political, then I have actually the last question.
Okay.
Sorry, guys. But we can have a new show about this. What should we as a nation do in order to make sure that we keep a positive image about our country and that it also correlates with reality?
I can answer one thing about that you asked before about campaigns. That Estonia 100 is of course coming next year. So this is also, can't talk about it more now, but I guess in a few months we also invite Estonians to participate. This is another campaign where we use locals quite a lot, I would say. So keep your eyes open. And I think Estonia 100 is a good year to forget all the bad comments and just really come together and create. And it's already working now because there are so many gifts that are done to Estonia. So I think the best thing you can do is just be positive and be friendly. If you have tourists here, and whatever you do it good. Because it's all about the experience that you have here from the moment you step out of the plane until you go back. So this is, no matter how much marketing we do, today user-generated content is like, I don't know, 99% of what really matters. All the people who come here, what they share, what are their experiences, what are the reviews they write, what they post on their social media. This is what actually has the actual reach. So give good experience as a local person, and that's why we actually travel, if we love the people, not pictures.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Silver.
Yeah, Shardee mentioned Estonia 100. We also have a partnership with the Estonia 100 program, and we will write also about stories about where we come from, where we are, and where we're going to. We write about Estonian identity and history and the great events that will happen during that time. But yeah, I agree that the user experience is very important, and I would say that looks actually pretty positive. I mean, the people who come to Estonia for a short time, I think they experience it tends to be pretty positive. Really, looking at the comments and feedback, and when they spend like a week and 2 weeks, then pretty positive. And they tend to say that people are friendly here, and also it's interesting. We didn't actually talk about, but food. It's interesting that if you look at some of the questionnaires and polls and surveys, and lots of visitors have had many good things to say about Estonian food. Which is pretty much fusion, really. Like, you would call it modern fusion. So there are good things. Maybe, I think that's been discussed before as well, but maybe I think we should really recommend people to visit outside Tallinn more, really to go to bogs and forests maybe, and because it's true that in some large European countries you don't have that luxury. I mean, it you have parks. I lived in London. Of course, London's got huge parks, but you don't have a place to go like where you can be completely alone. And I think this is really good. This is really something that maybe we should highlight more and promote. That you half an hour from Tallinn and you can I don't know how you would call it, but some sort of silence tourism or whatever. So of course again the downside here is that if you get too many people, you promote too many people, then you wouldn't have that luxury of silence anymore. But yeah, I would say that of course as an Estonian, then highlight the positive and then let's hope that people enjoy.
And hope all Estonians in Estonia will behave like Estonians living abroad.
That's a good point.
Okay. Thank you, Shardee. Thank you, Silver.
Thank you.
We had a great show. We need to close it up now. Thank you all, everybody who listened to the show. This was episode number 25. Today's great sound quality was provided by Hendrik Veer from Lakeside Sounds, and today was actually also our first video recorded episode. So we'll look how will this turn out. And make sure to tune in to our previous episodes on our homepage, sevenblaze.com/podcast. You can find us on iTunes, on YouTube, and whatever almost every podcasting app. You can search for Seven Blaze Social and find our previous episodes. And of course, soundcloud.com/Seven Blaze Social. Thank you guys for coming, girls and guys. And stay social. Thank you. Woo!